Good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew Ogden, and you're watching a webcast on LaRouchepack.com. It's November 16th, and this is the next in our ongoing and now established series of weekly events happening every Friday night as an institution on this website featuring Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. And as events have made clear in the recent days, this is a fully necessary institution for shaping policy both nationally and internationally. And Mr. LaRouche's leadership factor is crucial in the current situation. Now, I'll say just before we start, accompanying this broadcast, you will notice a paper, a report by Mr. LaRouche, which is currently on the LaRouche Pack website, available, called The Calamity of the Second Obama Administration. And in the beginning of this report, Mr. LaRouche asks the question whether President Obama may be facing a similar fate as Richard Nixon, perhaps even in the period preceding his inauguration for the beginning of his second term. So with that, we will be following the usual format. Mr. LaRouche will make opening remarks, and there will be a period for questions afterwards. So if you have any, please do send them in to info.larouchepack@gmail.com. And without any further ado, I introduce to you Mr. LaRouche.
Thank you. Well, I have actually 6 subjects to report on this evening. And the first one, of course, is one that reminds me of hearing the voice from years past of a famous reporter, Gabriel Heater, who has said, "There is bad news tonight." And that's what I have for you. It's mostly bad news, but it's, if you can cure it, it's not so bad. Anyway, the first thing is exactly that what's happened recently, since yesterday in particular, that Obama has goofed up his own standing by saying the wrong things in the wrong time, or shall we say the right time, which may bring him out of the presidency even before a chance at a second inauguration. That's where we stand. And that's the crucial issue on which everything hangs. Because if Obama is in a Richard Nixon outgoing mode, as it may prove to be the case, if he continues to talk the way he's been talking for the past 2 days and be acting for the past 2 days, then we will go through a complete change in the succession of the presidency. And that may be a good opportunity because, in particular, what both candidates represented going into the new inauguration of a president would be very bad news for the nation. Both the Republican and Democratic nominees, or prospective nominees, were absolutely incompetent in everything they proposed respecting the U.S. economy and about everything else, but especially the U.S. economy. So now we're in a period where everything is being shaken up, and we're having something like a Nixon problem in terms of this presidency, where suddenly something began to happen. And Richard Nixon said the wrong thing at the right time and found himself on the street, or something equivalent to that. And that could happen to Obama. If that happens, then the policy of the United States is up for redefinition. Obama is still a problem, because Obama, who is merely a stooge for the British monarchy, especially for Tony Blair, the man who invented the second war in Iraq, and the guy who was the controller, actually, of Obama. So that these things have to be cleared away, and it looks as though they might be. Obama is intrinsically stupid, essentially. I mean, he has a posture. He's a posturer. Words come out of his mouth. Attitudes come out of his mouth. His basic attitude is he hates people. And that comes out very clearly in his performances. He's a fraud. But he was put in place by the British monarchy under the direction of Tony Blair, who ushered him into the United States, and another gentleman from Britain funded the drug pushing, which got him nominated for the presidency and elected. And he got some more of that drug pushing again in his support in this attempt for re-nomination. But if that is the case, that he is on the way out, and I just didn't refer what the point is that he has stated that Rice was not doing anything wrong in what she said in lying her head off. And he became enraged in the process of that press interview, that public interview, in that process, and began to say things which tended to be implicitly incriminating. And therefore the White House today is in a state of disruption and uncertainty, and it looks as though we are headed, probably, nothing is certain in this situation, but probably he's on the way out. And what he's involved in, and what the CIA has stated about the Benghazi affair, the facts and the truth of it, could lead to a full-scale, or full-throated, shall we say, treatment by the Congress, which may result probably, not necessarily certainly, because there's a lot at stake here for all parties, but probably we are seeing the back end of Obama, which may not be, after all, the worst end to look at. But presuming that all these things go that way, as I've indicated, what we're concerned about is what are we going to do to save the United States economy, the world economy, and prevent thermonuclear war. These should be the primary issues which are on the mind of every aware citizen in the United States and abroad, actually, today. That's where we stand. And it comes to the next thing. We are now presently under the policies left over by the former Republican candidate for president and by Obama himself. These policies are clinically insane. They used to have a guy in Brooklyn, and he would be advertising his services and as saying, "He is insane." And both of these guys, their economic policies have been clinically insane. What they're proposing essentially is a form of hyperinflation, which is already underway with the young Bush family operation, and which became worse afterward. So the hyperinflation is what these policies are. The policies of Bush beforehand, young Bush, the policies of Obama himself, and the policies of the Republican candidate for president also. They all had somewhat different flavors of syrup or whatever, but they all amounted to the same thing. Hyperinflation. Restrict everything to certain industries or businesses. Cut out everything else. Chop off all sorts of income on which people were dependent. And concentrate on these until the economy revives. What that was done in Europe, by the way, the same thing was done under the Euro system in Europe, has resulted in a hyperinflationary threat about to explode. For example, Portugal and Spain are destroyed. Greece is destroyed. Other parts of the Euro system are about to go into a deep crisis, a hyperinflationary crisis. And the United States, under Obama, what is destined, or is probably destined, to go through a hyperinflationary breakdown of the U.S. system. So therefore, the fact that Obama may be on the way to be thrown out of office, or heaved out of office, if you prefer that language, the fact of the matter is we cannot accept what the Obama administration means. We can't accept it not because we don't like it. It's true I don't like it. I despise it. It's rotten, evil. But because it will lead to the destruction of the United States and his continued policy. Therefore, the fact that he's made a fool of himself in the past couple of days with his attempt to cover up on the rice problem, their race problems and their rice problems added to that, this is led to the possibility of a full-throated Senate and congressional investigation by a select committee to go at this kind of problem. The same kind of team that was needed for the case of what happened with our former unfortunate President Clinton. And so that is exactly where we stand today. Clinton's on my mind. All right, so that's the situation. We're in a financial crisis, a breakdown crisis, in fact. And if the policies are not changed, there's no chance. Now, the first thing that has to be done, the first action that must occur if you're going to save the United States from a breakdown crisis, Glass-Steagall. The only thing that can save the United States from the worst possible outcome is the immediate installation of Glass-Steagall. Because what does that mean? Glass-Steagall means that we take all the junk business of Wall Street and we say that the United States has no obligation to bail out the junk bond business or the junk this business, and therefore they're on their own. If they can survive as merchant banks on their own without guarantees from the federal system, without creating any criminal actions, of course, by their treating, then that's the case. They don't make it, they're gone. And we have no federal government responsibility for bailing out any part of those banks. Only banks that qualify as national banks, as nationalized banks, public banks, regular banks, only those banks will be protected. Now, this leads to some other things. The very fact that we stop the hyperinflation by Glass-Steagall creates a different kind of problem. The different kind of problem is there's very little left in terms of actual value in any part of the system. That's why we have hyperinflation accelerating in Europe and in the United States. Because the economy of the United States is becoming increasingly worthless. And if you're trying to bail out worthless firms like these speculative banks, the Wall Street banks, at the same time that you're crushing the actual production of wealth by the U.S. economy, you're headed for the destruction of the U.S. economy. Now, this has already happened. And whole industries have disappeared. The automobile industry and everything related to it has been wiped off the map, essentially, in the United States. And only a small fraction of those types of industries still exist. There is presently no current form of employment which actually meets the needs of the people of the United States. All right, therefore, we're going to have to go to a second measure, which follows on Glass-Steagall. We're going to have to do a Franklin Roosevelt type of reform in addition to Glass-Steagall. Now, that additional form means that we're going to go into the process of national banking, national credit system banking. In other words, the trustworthy banks of the United States, the conventional public banking system, those banks will be protected. They will also be used as a vehicle for distributing funds, federal funds, as future funds for selected industries and other forms of productive employment. And therefore, we're going to have to create employment which is otherwise impossible under the present system of people who are now on the street, so to speak, on worse conditions. The key thing we're going to use for that is, of course, NWAPA. Because what we need is to immediately change the United States from a broken down nation which produces almost nothing and begs from China and other places for what to eat or wear, that we're going to have to reemploy a good part of the labor force. Now, admittedly, they're not in the best condition. Qualified productive labor is not as old as I am, but approaching that state of affairs. And therefore, there are a limited number of people who still have the technological skills needed to direct these industries. Well, that's not really a bad thing, because it's what's needed. And anything that's needed is not a bad thing. So therefore, what we're going to have to do is actually create large-scale employment where we can, but large-scale employment which is not make work, but is based on industries and other enterprises which are necessary for the productivity, the physical productivity of the nation. Now, NWAPA, which we're talking about the order of magnitude of 14 million jobs, that's not peanuts. It may start slow. We may start like a WPA type project from beyond. But we're going to take the labor force, as we did under Franklin Roosevelt, we're going to increase the productivity of the labor force as we break it into these jobs. And it's going to change the character of the United States from one of desperation to one of progress. And also, the other aspect of NWAPA is not merely the fact that it's one of the best machines for large-scale increase in employment in the United States. It, at the same time, actually involves a qualitative change in the weather system of the United States. This reorganization of the water system will increase the amount of water actually available through recycling inside the United States and Canada and Mexico. So therefore, we're already creating jobs which are productive. We are increasing the productivity of the nation per capita and per square kilometer. And that is a Roosevelt-type operation, but on a more desperate scale than what Roosevelt had to do in the 1930s. The same idea. We also, for other reasons, are going to have to re-examine what Detroit used to be. Detroit used to be the make-everything business, especially during the period of World War II. We made everything. We made airplanes, all kinds of things that they'd never made before, out of the floor space of the automobile industry. We had vast floor space, which is only in recent years was shut down. But this floor space was ready to go to produce space projects, anything. It was a capability of the United States for mass production, real progressive mass production. It was the kind of thing that made the miracle of our U.S. ability to save the world from the Nazi system. Without what Roosevelt did in the 1930s, we could have not been only defeat the Nazi system, we would probably become part of it. So that's the change which we must make. One of the most important aspects of this, in addition to NWAPA, and in addition to going back to what the build everything kind of operation was with the auto center on the auto industry, we're going to also have to go to space, because we are in immediate danger of problems, which we enumerated in other occasions, which have to be done based on what the progress we've already achieved in NWAPA and also in space itself already. We're going to have to deal with the threat of the destruction of Earth, or large parts of it, from objects which are floating around there between the areas of Venus and Mars. And we're going to have to interfere with these objects which might otherwise, in the extreme case, destroy human life on Earth, or might destroy an area like the San Francisco Bay Area could be destroyed by a certain size of plausible arrival of one of these pieces of crap. And therefore, we're going to have to reopen NWAPA, not only NWAPA, we're going to have to reopen NASA. And NASA will have to be reopened on a much larger scale, because without the technology of a science driver program, we cannot get the increase of productivity, of net productivity we require to build this nation. And so therefore, that is what we must do. Glass-Steagall is the stepping stone which must be done first if the U.S. economy is to survive. It's just that. And the fact that Obama is now in deep kimchi, as it's said in Korea, that he's in that situation, means that he's ripe to be thrown out of office, and the sooner the better. It's time for his retirement. The man is suffering from mental defects and so forth. He needs this rest, a lot of rest, for the rest of his life, for example. But anyway, if he's out of the picture, and it looks as though he's being thoroughly discredited, then we have a chance of saving civilization. But we have to have a program of development which includes NASA's revival and expansion, which includes NWAPA, and includes other measures. Without these measures, the United States, buddy, ain't going to make it. And therefore, the fact that Obama is having a bad time tonight is good, because it may means that he's gone soon. And if he's gone soon, we now will then have the immediate opportunity to break the chain. Because in that case, then we will find, the American people will realize that the party system, which has been used to control the United States, will be broken open. The party system has always been a threat to the United States, especially since the Andrew Jackson administration, when the essence of the U.S. Constitution was destroyed by a bunch of foreign predators operating behind a old wise man, so to speak, a fool, Andrew Jackson, just an old grouch making noises. And you had a committee of people, including traitors to the United States, including traitors who were spies for the British against the United States, who had assassinated members of the United States, citizens of the United States, on behalf of their cause. These guys, that factor has to be eliminated. If that factor is eliminated, then we have an opening to cancel what has to be canceled, to take Glass-Steagall, to create a national banking system, to establish a credit system, all of these kinds of things that were done by Franklin Roosevelt. These kinds of measures are put into operation, and then we have a chance of survival. Without that, we don't. And therefore, I'm happy to say that Obama is having a bad night this evening. May have more of them before he leaves. Just so he knows that he's being kicked out. All right, so now we have to deal with the larger physical economic issues of the planet. Because Western and Central Europe are broken down. Spain and Portugal are shot. Greece is notoriously dying. Europe in general is going into a hyperinflationary spiral. So therefore, the present Euro system, which is actually a sub-run operation of the British system, cannot continue unless we assist from the United States in coordinating operations which will allow the nations of Europe, which are now dumped into the cesspool called the Euro, unless those nations can be restored as nations, as sovereign nations, then there's not much hope for the world. Because if we have a sick Europe on top of what has been a sickened USA, the world is in trouble. And wherever the world gets in trouble and in doubt, you get the Nazi phenomenon can break through in the form of something in the USA and elsewhere, which becomes a force of destruction. Therefore, we must save Western and Central Europe from itself and from its British masters, and become again a system of sovereign nation states which can resume what they did in their better years and get out of the grip of the British Empire. Now, the third thing that comes up with this thing is not only this threat, but the question of thermonuclear war. If we continue in the direction which Obama was pushing, under the direction of the Queen of England, and with the aid of the so-called Greenie movement, we are headed still in the direction of thermonuclear war. And people in various parts of Europe who are knowledgeable about these matters know that. Obama in the presidency, under these conditions, is the peril of an immediate launching of thermonuclear war. we have been hovering on the edge of launching of thermonuclear war, which again is very simple. The President of the United States, say Obama, declares war, invoking the United Nations right to conduct a general warfare. The immediate effect is to launch a thermonuclear attack on those nations which are defined as the enemies to be attacked, Russia and China and other nations specifically. The minute that happens by anybody that starts to set off a thermonuclear war, all of the relevant nations, within a matter of minutes, is going to go up with a thermonuclear mobilization. And that thermonuclear mobilization will occur, and when it occurs, and after it occurs, during a period of not longer than an hour and a half of the whole show, most of the planet will be either dead or dying or extinct. So the threat, the great threat, is that we come to the point which we're becoming closer and closer to ever since Obama went into Libya and killed, murdered the former head of state of Libya. That was a murder. The guy was wounded. The people shot him as a captive. And you know that Obama is prone to extermination of people without trial, without due process. Well, the point is that obviously that program will not work. There's a British Empire, it's got its foolish ideas, but that can be covered. If the United States does not commit itself to Obama's intention, and that of the Bush family earlier, the intention to go to thermonuclear war, if that does not happen, then the planet can be saved. Because no one can conduct a successful or even attempted successful thermonuclear attack if the United States is opposed to it. And therefore, the getting rid of Obama, which he seems to be doing very well for himself these days, will be a blessing because it eliminates the greatest threat of thermonuclear war facing mankind today. And thermonuclear war today means that within an hour and a half of the initial exchange of blasts, that a lot of the people in this planet are suddenly dead, and a lot of territory is suddenly destroyed. This war cannot be fought by sane people. It means the virtual extinction of human beings. So that's where we are. Those are the issues. They're the only real issues today. And what is coming up against Obama, the prospective elimination of Obama, which is not assured, but is steaming out there, threatening to become real. And he made the fool of himself and set himself up with the frauds he committed before this election. And he's now in danger of losing his position because he made a fool of himself in his lies, his manifold of lies, for which he's being called to account by the Republicans and will be called by also members of the Democratic Party in the Senate and the House. This guy is on the road to chop. He might escape that somehow or other. The British will do everything possible to save him. But he's now, at this moment, he's totally disgraced himself. And he's ready for the political chop. And we should prepare ourselves to receive that blessing, but also respond to the opportunity by taking the kinds of measures I've just indicated here.
Well, thank you so much. If you're just tuning in, this is a live webcast, a regular feature on the LaRouche PAC website featuring Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. Now, as you stated, President Obama is probably having a very bad night tonight, and we intend to make it a little bit worse. the experience that we had on Capitol Hill just over the past 2 days is that several members on both the House and the Senate side are saying openly that this is worse than Watergate and Iran-Contra combined. This is big, and the cover-up is getting deeper and deeper. So I'd like to ask Leandra Bernstein, who's an editor on LaRouchepack.com, to come to the podium and ask the first question on this subject.
Thank you. Now, there's been a lot of reporting in the press recently on the sudden resignation of General Petraeus over the extramarital affair, as it's being said. But what this appears to be, and I believe you've said it earlier this week, is a cover-up to cover up a cover-up. And you have what just came out recently, which you made reference to in your opening remarks, is on September 14th in a briefing to the United States Congress, General Petraeus was defending the line that it was a spontaneous protest that occurred in Benghazi on the 11th of September. Now that he's resigned, he's saying that within 24 hours, the CIA had issued a report saying that that the attack was launched by al-Qaeda-allied extremists, which is a very, very different tune to be whistling. Now, as Matt referenced, there is currently discussion of a full congressional investigation along the lines of a Watergate investigation, an Iran-Contra style investigation, because it's clear that there have been lies told, many lies told, and a serious cover-up has been launched. But there's a sort of innocent question that comes up in this whole situation when you look at the attack that took place on 9/11, and I want to ask it because, as we've discussed in these webcasts earlier, the tale of Benghazi is a much longer tale, and it goes directly to the Tony Blair doctrine, the Blair doctrine of international affairs. So the question is, why were the orders given for the U.S. forces to stand down on September 11th, 2012, in Benghazi? And I ask this in the context of really 2 decades of these kinds of interventions. That you have the Libya intervention, you have the Libyan Islamic Fighters Group, which in 2007 was cited by a West Point study as an al-Qaeda allied grouping, who we stood behind in the deposition and eventually the murder of Muammar Gaddafi. Then there was Bosnia, 1992 to 1995, when the Pentagon was implicit in moving thousands of Afghani Mujahideen fighters from Central Asia into Bosnia to fight the war there against the Islamic forces versus the Serbs, and with weapons that were purchased by Iran and Turkey and financed by Saudi Arabia, and then the movement of these elements taken care of by the United States. And then there's Kosovo, which was the event on which Tony Blair's 1999 speech, "The End of the Westphalian System," that intervention into Kosovo was what that doctrine was, the occasion that doctrine was based on, where the Kosovo Liberation Army that we stood behind, we supported, we financed, was known to be funded primarily by opium and heroin money. And from the time that over a period of years, the impact of our giving this force safe haven in the United States led to a doubling of the percentage of heroin coming on the streets of the United States that originated from that region. And I mean, this, I don't mean to go on as if to say this is the trend and things will never change. But I raise this question because I want to know, these are our assets. These have been our assets. So in the case of Benghazi on September 11th, why were the U.S. forces ordered to stand down?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, there's no doubt at the present time, that the stand down in not doing nothing about Stevens' case, this was deliberate, and it was deliberate on the part of Obama, and the follow through by Obama on this thing on her is the same problem. This was an operation by them. It's a planned murder for effect. Now, the problem was that Obama, who is nothing but a British stooge, is something more than a British stooge. He's still a puppet, and very much a puppet. He has a certain attitude, which he's conditioned to, but he's not really a sane person. He's not really an intelligent person. He's very much, as I've said before, his characteristics are those of the Emperor Nero. You take the history of the life of the Emperor Nero as emperor, and his life was before that, and you have a certain personality. Obama has, miraculously, the same character traits, psychological, psychiatric traits, as the Emperor Nero. So he was brought into the United States at a very dubious matter. He may not have been a citizen of the United States, but the British don't care about those niceties when these matters come up. Now, the other side of the thing you have to look at is say, well, what's the setting? Why did the United States do this? Well, it wasn't the United States. As we know, since the Andrew Jackson administration, which is the source of much of our evil in the United States, this pig is a grunting pig who really had no control over his government. He has served 2 terms, and he was nothing but really a grunting puppet, a rage ball puppet, where other people ran the policy, and he simply echoed and supported the policy by making nasty grunts, like some wild pig or something. Right? So the people who ran it were Aaron Burr, the chief British agent and traitor to the United States, who organized that administration, the administration of him. All right, so you say, what's going on here? Well, the fact of the matter is that the British Empire had taken over the United States through banking systems, including the British banking systems, which are based in New York City and Boston. So this administration was nothing but a creation of the British Empire using British imperial forces in Boston and in New York City, in that area, which were used to create the administration, his administration. And this led to the breaking up of the U.S. economy. Because in the years following his leaving office, there was a general breakdown of the entire U.S. system, caused by this breakdown. And this system was used to bring into being the Confederacy and to promote slavery, to kill off the Indians, to take the areas which were assigned to the Indians by George Washington, and to get them killed in order to turn the territory they inherited into a territory for African slaves to be introduced. Now, this is reality. The point here is we're dealing not with nations. The British are not a nation. They're an empire. They've been an empire ever since the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars. And they've controlled all of Europe. They became an empire in the Peace of Paris in 1763, when they took over India and Canada and other areas of the world. It was consolidated as an empire in the proceeds of the negotiations which led to the post-Napoleonic system, where everybody was cheated except others. Now, to the present day, there is still a British Empire. Now, the new phase of the British Empire following that was established when? When they kicked out the Prime Minister, so to speak, of Germany, Bismarck. The removal of Bismarck from his position lifted the opposition, the blocs, to launching of general warfare in Europe. The purpose of this general warfare was to bring all of Europe under the control of the British Empire. In a similar way, in recent period, the Saudis who actually organized, with the British, organized the 9/11 operation, the original one, and also organized this thing in Benghazi, the same thing, was organized by that cabal. As a matter of fact, we are dominated by a cabal of British control over the United States, shared with the Saudis. The two operations done by the British in New York City and in Benghazi, these two operations were both done by the British with the Saudis. In other words, a British-Saudi combination ran 9/11. And the Bush presidency and the Obama presidency have both covered up that fact. In other words, what happened in New York City and elsewhere, where these attacks were done against the United States, they were done by the Saudis, including the Saudi representative to the United States, who is now a leader in the Saudi administration. And these are the people, in other words, an empire composed of the British and Saudi influences, and the control of this empire over large parts of the nationhood, not as the British Empire, but as the Queen's imperial empire. And that's where all this is done. What happened to the United States? Why did we go green? Why were greenies introduced to the United States? When people were losing the United States and losing everything in it as a result of the green policy. The green policy is killing Americans, which is what the British intention was in producing the green policy. The green policy is the policy of the Queen of England, who's the Empress of the British Empire. And we are still dominated. People get, our British friends, our British friends, our British allies. This is the empire. This is the enemy of the United States. And that's how these things happen. Europe has been crushed. Western and Central Europe are crushed. France has not yet collapsed. Germany has not yet collapsed. But otherwise in general, Portugal, Spain, Greece, now Italy, all these parts of which are formerly Europe are gone. They're being broken. They're about to go into an actual hyperinflationary breakdown, if thus there's a change immediately. And that's what this is all about. And you have the fact that the Queen of England is a sadist, and Obama is a complete sadist. He kills people. He does it with impunity. He just reaches out and orders somebody to kill people. En masse. He has a quota. Every weekly meeting he has once a week, he goes a quota for killing people. By due process? By law? These creatures are animals. They no longer behave and respond like human beings. And the problem is our party system. The party system in the United States, like the party system in ancient Rome. Remember the image of ancient Rome in the Colosseum. And you would have these events like the killing of slaves or that sort of thing. Contests in the arena. Human sacrifices, animal sacrifices, all this sort of thing. And the audience would sit in the Colosseum. And the emperor or somebody like tantamount to the emperor would be seated in these events. And the event would come, who's going to kill whom, who's going to live. And the emperor would signal round to the audience, well, which do you prefer? And a vote would be taken, or tantamount to a vote would be taken. And the person in question would be either killed, or persons killed, just simply killed, openly in the arena, or turn free for a chance to get killed the next time. The persecution of Christians by the Roman Empire is one of the great horror shows of history in that respect. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a British Empire and Obama, which represent the same kind of thing. The problem is that when we become party loyal, rather than loyal to the United States, loyal to a party over that of the United States, which happens now in these elections, then our people lose their minds and their morality and begin to become like their own worst enemies. Why do you think people would vote for this pig? Look what this guy did as president in his first term so far. Look what he did. The crimes he committed against humanity. And yet our people, our voting people, came back and kissing the ass of this creature who's a mass murderer. Because what happened was, as with the Andrew Jackson problem, the United States died, virtually died, with the inauguration of Andrew Jackson, who's one of the nastiest and dirtiest pigs in the history of the United States. Not as bad as his master, but he qualifies for the same category. And therefore these things happen as atrocities, as they happened under empires. Under the Norman invasion of Europe, for example, the same thing. The Venetian system, the first Venetian system, the second Venetian system, that of William of Orange, who in power actually established the British Empire as a system. So it's not a mystery of who did what to whom. It's a matter of a process. Say, why were people killed en masse, like the Christians massacred? Why? The other massacres that occurred, common massacres of entire groups of people. What happened in Troy? In the siege of Troy? Mass murder. What happened in Tunisia under the Romans? A similar kind of thing. Mass murder. And therefore the issue is the sacredness of human life. You don't do those things if you're human. You don't allow those things to happen if you're human and able to stop them. And therefore Obama is no obstacle, but rather a promoter of the worst quality of crimes against humanity. And when this SOB is thrown out of office, as he richly deserves that kind of consideration, then we can all maybe breathe a sigh of relief if we don't get the people themselves, like our children, teenage and younger children, who are becoming more criminal than they are people as a result of this process. This is the last chance to save civilization for a long time to come.
Thanks. I'm Jason Ross. I'm with the LaRouche PAC Science Research Team. As a follow-up on that, the party system made it the case that in this election there was no actual discussion of the policies of great importance facing our country. That every 4 years we have an opportunity to elect a new president, and yet in that process, as it just unfolded, there was really nothing discussed of the most important issues. There was nothing laid out as an economic policy. There's appealing to groups and some strange idea of a continuum of left to right, but no actual ideas. I wanted to bring up a discussion of credit, the national banking system you had described as the necessary solution once we have Glass-Steagall. Now, right now in the United States, there is discussion of the fiscal cliff and the sequestration that is to take place, the cuts that are going to occur. There's some discussion about whether the Pentagon is going to have to lay off all of the mistresses it's employing. It's not certain just yet. And then in Europe, you're seeing a sweep of mass strikes. Greece is being cut off from funding almost entirely now, saying, look, you followed the rules, you made the cuts, things are getting worse. Well, yeah, you did what we said, but we're still not going to give you any more money. It's obvious this just doesn't work. Now, in the United States, even the New York Times recently had posted an article called Mr. Hamilton's Growth Strategy, where it took up the distinction between trying to balance things in a fiscal way of, raising taxes, cutting spending, as opposed to creating growth. So let me read you, this is a question that came in from our internet viewing audience, and remember, if you're watching, you can send questions to info.larouchepack@gmail.com. This question comes from Joe Postma, who's in Canada. He writes, in a credit system, credit is uttered by the national bank with direction from the government, to be used for national infrastructure projects, for example. Does this credit require investors, say with bonds and such, or is it basically created for free? Or is this the same thing if need be? Is it okay to say that essentially a sovereign government can create credit, or money, for free, and can then spend this on projects for the public physical economic good? Is it as simple as this? In such a scenario, if it is as such, I presume the inflationary effect of creating new money would be offset by the increase in physical economic productivity and other such non-quantitative but qualitative upshifts in the phase space of society? Would inflationary and deflationary effects be managed? And why would they need to be managed? And via what mechanisms would they be? My understanding is that essentially a sovereign government can create money for free. And then, given the universal principle that people will work for money and that humans are creative, the future can essentially be built for free, if the created money is directed into such sensible, future-oriented endeavors. That is, the money was created for free by the government without bearing interest in the nature of its existence, not as debt. And the human physical labor was performed in the act of humans being creative and wishing to earn an income to stay alive and have a family, as is naturally done by any human. Are these accurate things to describe the credit system?
No, absolutely not. They have nothing to do with the credit system. And the problem is, it's a general problem of stupidity, especially among bankers, who are among the worst of these things, who have a fetish, believe in money, a money system. Now, the stupidity here is that they don't know the nature of a human being. And therefore they don't know how to treat a human being because they don't know what the nature of a human being is. They think a human being is just an animal who has no willpower to create anything. An animal cannot invent a principled, make a principled invention. Only human beings can. Well, unfortunately, many human beings don't trouble themselves to do that. But what's the problem? Think about time. When the past has occurred, how the hell are you going to get something out of it? When the past has occurred. Anything that is going to occur to improve human society is going to occur after the present. So this is not a matter of money. Money is intrinsically has no value. Money as such has no value. So how can it convey value? How can you talk about value? Only idiots who don't know what the human species is have a problem with this. Because they believe in the money system. They believe that money in itself intrinsically has value, economic value. Well, it doesn't. Think about what defines a livable species, a survivable species of any kind of creature. There's a question of future, past and future, isn't there? They can't change the past. They can only change something in their behavior or their activities which creates something new out of the past into the present and into the future. That's all animal forms of life of that nature. Like, for example, the greenie. The greenie is an intrinsically stupid person. All greenies are intrinsically stupid. Why? Because they don't believe in growth. Now, no species, no living species ever survived on the basis of that kind of policy. All species which went to zero growth went extinct. And they deserved it because they wished it. Now, the difference between mankind and the animal comes into play at this point. What's the difference? Mankind is capable of creativity. No other species has the ability to create net, willful creativity, in effect. Right? So therefore, it is creativity by the human species of a kind which no other kind of living form has, to the best of our knowledge, or ever had, best of our knowledge. But the idea of maintaining the growth of the species, the self-improvement of the conditions of life of the species, determine whether the species is going to die out or become extinct in general. In the case of the human being, the ability of the human species to grow and to develop and to meet the standards of its existence is based on the quality of invention which does not exist in any other species. In other words, how does this occur? Well, human evolution does not occur just biologically. As a matter of fact, biology, as long as it just functions on a constant level, will function like an animal. But the human species existence depends upon the creation of states of mind, of the evolution of the states of human mind, which are not possible for any other known species. That means that we depend upon what we call the willful or conscious intention to create a new idea which did not exist within the human species earlier. So we create the future. If you say you're going to zero growth, which is the general policy pushed by the Queen of England, the reduction of the human population from 7 billion people to about 1 billion people, that's her policy. The whole policy of the British Empire is based on this kind of mass genocide, from 7 billion human beings down to 1, if you're lucky. So that's where the problem lies. Now, what do we do? What does our system do? The American system, as opposed to the European system, which is largely based on the old Roman system, the old imperialist system. The American system saw the future. The American said value lies not in the past, it lies in the future. And therefore, what is valuable is what you are going to do, not what you have done. Because you cannot recreate the past. You cannot resurrect the past from the grave. You can only resurrect mankind in a higher form of existence than before. That's the basic rule. So therefore, when we talk about credit, we're saying money has no intrinsic value. There's nothing about money that generates creativity. You say it's an incentive? That doesn't qualify. The fact is the human being is the only species which is capable of willfully transforming itself in its capabilities. No other species can do that, has ever done it. Yes, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom functions, but they function on the basis of a fixed recipe, unless they create a new species. Mankind, without changing mankind's species, is capable of increasing the power of mankind and the ability of mankind to change the future of the planet and beyond. And so therefore all these arguments about in defense of the money system are absolutely scientifically nonsense. It is the ability of mankind to make discoveries which increase the energy flux density represented by the activity of a human individual that is creativity. And all design and inventions are based on effects to that same group. For example, healthcare improvements Why? You want to keep human beings living longer and living more effectively. So therefore you make an investment. But the result is you'll get a payback because the living person is now able to make a contribution which otherwise would not occur. Creativity lies in the ability of the individual to be educated and improved in capability to ideas they never would have had before without those discoveries. It is the advance of scientific progress in the discovery of the means by which mankind flourishes on the planet and beyond it. We're now going to Mars. We're not going to Mars directly right now. That's going to take another generation or so to get to the point we can even do that, consider that. But we are going to do is we are now going to revive Nawapa. We're going to, from the grave from which it never came. We're going to also save NASA, because NASA is necessary, the way Curiosity worked, to put new systems on Mars, which is the one planet we're capable of dealing with right now. We're able to deal with that. We're not going to put people on there yet, and that's too risky as an operation. It's not a profitable operation. But we're going to put systems on Mars, like Curiosity, but more advanced than Curiosity. We're going to build systems on Mars which will enable us as mankind to discover ways to defend people on Earth, at Earth itself, from these damn things that are pesking after us now. We're going to save human life on planet Earth by the assistance of going to places like Mars, to develop systems on Mars with the help of a restored NASA system, an improved NASA system, was the original intention. And we're going to create those systems there, which we will use in order to discover how to deal with threats such as asteroids and so forth. And we're going to have to develop those systems, which are going to be electronic, etc., kinds of systems, which will operate among different bodies of the solar system at the speed of light. We are going to use the principle of the speed of light as a way of organizing and reorganizing and developing systems inside the system between Mars orbit and Venus orbit. Develop those systems which we need to develop in order to protect human beings on Earth from being exterminated by asteroids and similar kinds of problems. That's our mission orientation. And it's that orientation of mankind. Look, eventually the sun is going to blow up on us. Probably some people say 1 billion years, some say 2 billion years. And I question the question, well, if it's getting that bad, maybe we better evacuate from this solar system and go someplace else. Well, how the devil can we ever do that if we as mankind do not use our creative potential in order to move mankind through its own development into levels of capability where mankind can recolonize the space from areas that no longer are viable for human habitation? Is creativity per se. It's the hatred of the greenie per se, the despising of the greenie per se as a defective species, no longer fit to be called human, because they show none of the characteristics that distinguish the human species from the beast. And the beast usually do better.
That's good to know. Now, I have a follow-up question that is really along a similar line as your previous response. And I think it gets to a major issue that you brought up in your most recent paper, which is the human species as a species that is uniquely has the power to know and affect the future, to make future history. And in better times, that is exactly what children are reared to do, to create future history, what people are educated to do, what skills they acquire toward that purpose. So a question came in from a LaRouche PAC supporter who is a skilled worker in Illinois. with a question that has been on their mind for quite a bit of time. And the questioner asks, there was a brief surge in positive identity coming out of Kennedy's commitment to space exploration and the impact of that on society, but it pretty much died with him. As it seems, the country has voted for the greater of the two evils. Right along with this, the work ethic, striving for professionalism, self-managing for greater efficiency, etc., seems to be almost gone, replaced by the least amount of work, responsibility, and initiative as possible to get by. I'd add, for the greatest profit. So the question is, do you think that the greatest step mankind can make, your full recovery program, is enough to break this weakness, and soon after implementation, or will we have to wait generations for this part of the recovery to flourish?
Well, I think the question is, in one sense, moot. But for me, it's not moot. For me, it's imperative. And what I look at are the factors in society which prevent mankind from doing what I know mankind has to do. Yes, it's true. If you take the moral and intellectual degeneration of successive generations of Americans since the assassination of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, then you have a constant decline in the intellectual and moral qualities of the human species inside the United States. And a similar trend has been active in Europe itself. You have therefore China suddenly emerges as a leading nation of the world because it is still progressing in its own terms, while the United States and Western and Central Europe have been degenerating over the same period. What the intention has always been that of the British Empire, and to understand this thing you've got to talk about the British Empire, which was established fully as an empire, with the close of the Napoleonic period. And since that time, we have been in a war, if to the extent we're patriots actually still, against the British on this issue. We believe, as the Massachusetts Bay Colony founded this conception based on the indirect influence of Nicholas Lacuza, which is Nicholas Lacuza is the key definition of all modern science that's competent. And what happened in the British system of this silly old Newton, this black magic specialist, has been the destruction of civilization. What happened is that the development of civilization in North America in particular fought against the degeneration of society in Europe. And Europe would have died of its own rot long since, but for the United States' existence. And this was the intention of Nicholas Lacuza, which his instructions to his survivors was to cross the oceans away from Europe into other continents, and to find there the basis for developing the civilization based on the principles which he understood. Christopher Columbus was inspired directly by the work of Nicholas Lacuza. And the whole enterprise was Cuza's associates working with Christopher Columbus and others to develop these colonies in North America and elsewhere, but especially North America. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was an expression of this until it was crushed by William of Orange, and that sort of thing. So the British Empire came into power as the second Venetian system, in which he played this particular role of forming what became the British Empire by invading England and Ireland, committing general atrocities against the Irish and things like that. And that became the core of the British Empire, which was established in about 1872, or 1772, rather. And this empire spread through more warfare in opposition to the American system. And then, as a result of the Napoleonic Wars, which was another period of ruin in general, they launched the British system in concert with the Austro-Hungarian system. This went through evolutions, and Europe persisted. The United States, nevertheless, survived. The Lincoln survival in the Civil War was an example of this. Other great advances in the United States, and so forth. We in the United States, in particular, since we were, in a sense, Europeans. I mean, Americans were Europeans of all varieties. They came from all parts of Europe and other places. They came from China. They came from other places. So we were a people who were living in an area which was relatively independent of the corruption which dominated Europe in particular. And that's the essence of this matter, is that we represent that commitment, or should represent that commitment. And what's happened is, over the recent 3 generations, since the assassination of the 2 Kennedys, we've been going through a process of degeneration of the American people, of our society, of our culture, on everything, under the influence of the British monarchy. And so the dirty part of old Europe, the British monarchy, and the Saudi kingdom, which is an integral part of the British monarchy today, the Saudi kingdom, which with the British monarchy together launched the 9/11 event in 2001. And they're still trying to cover up for it. And only because virtual traitors in the United States refused to allow the books to be opened on who actually did 9/11. 9/11 was done by a British Saudi operation pivoted on the British BAE system. They directly created, launched, steered, and backed the operation against the citizens of the United States, as in the New York City area. Those criminals being allowed to run loose still in the United States now, more than 10 years later, indicate the treason which has dominated the political system of the United States, the political party system of the United States from that time to the present. And that is the root of our problem. We must get the treason out of the U.S. system, which means we have to end the idea of a party system where citizens act like Roman citizens in the arena, looking to sign thumbs out, thumbs up, thumbs down. You die or you don't at the pleasure of the emperor. And that kind of system came into the United States, a treasonous conception, which came to maturity under the younger George Bush as president. And the younger George Bush and what he represented, his father was no damn good either, in fact, if you want to know the truth. But he wasn't as stupid as the son was. But this treason, because everybody knew. Why do you think they call this the chapters which are secret, the secret documents which are suppressed from the American people? Why? Because they prove that 9/11 in September of 2001 was done under the direction of the Saudi prince who represented the United States, or was represented to the United States, and by the British system, which ran a cover-up of the fact that it was the British system, including the BAE Corporation, and the Saudis themselves, who entirely ran the entirety of 9/11. But they did it within complicity of the British, because the British factor in this organized the cover-up of what the Saudis had done, and used the BAE system as a source of the weaponry on which they would base this rape of the United States. So we have a case of treason against the United States by witting figures in power in the United States who have connived to continue to cover up the fact that an act of war by the British and its Saudi partners was conducted against the United States under the protection of a Bush president. And that's the way to understand this stuff.
I want to shift gears and return to the discussion you had brought up about defending the Earth from threats off of our planet. I had the opportunity this week to attend the NASA Innovative Advanced Concept Symposium down in Hampton, Virginia, where there were presentations in particular on two topics of importance for what you were getting at. One was the destruction of asteroids with the use of nuclear explosives, and working out some of the technologies required to be able to track them actively by the rocket that's going to intercept them. And also a fusion rocket program inspired by the earlier Orion project that NASA had implemented decades ago. Now, among these people who, there are people who really want to do things that seem impossible. One of obviously the big questions that comes up with any group of scientists these days is funding, because there really isn't very much. One person had said that it's odd that the DoD gets huge amounts of money for all sorts of threats, and yet, in recent years, there's been about a $500,000 spent on this project for defending us from asteroids using nuclear weapons, which seems to be an imbalance given the threats that we're facing. So I'd like to ask what was on the minds of a lot of people at this conference, which is how are we going to get the government to treat the role of science both in these threats seriously and in general for the economy?
Well, in real science, which some people remember, some with fondness and some with dim memories, these wear and tear and things. The fact is that there's no such problem. That what you have is the use of creativity per se, human creativity per se. And that is the source of all goodies, in the fact that any discovery of a universal physical principle, expressed in any form, can be transformed into an application which is of relevance to humanity. In other words, the key thing is the first measure you have to make of progress is energy flux density. As you increase the energy flux density of the concentration of means of production or means of development of instruments, that you increase the potential productivity of the entire nation. It's when you stop science and stop the application of science, which you've developed, is that you destroy the nation. Mankind, the history of mankind is that mankind is the only species which ever willingly used fire. No other species ever willingly used fire. They didn't have the brains to do so, even if they wanted to. But the earliest type of mankind, which leaves behind a fireplace, any signs of a fireplace and its use, shows you that mankind was there. Because what is definable as mankind was therefore there. Now, the whole point of this thing is there is no such thing as this or that. The fundamental thing is the increase of the intensity of energy flux density. That is the measure of progress. We've gone from simple sources of fire to more advanced forces of fire. We've gone to fuels which give us more power in fire. We've recently gone beyond uranium, which is an exhaust product which you can use, put together. We now have gone with synthetic fuels, or what are for us synthetic fuels on Earth, which give us still greater power to develop mankind's capabilities. And if we continue along this process, mankind in the future should have the ability, before the sun blows up on us, to have moved the human species to some part of the universe where we will not be affected by that explosion. The objective is that mankind must constantly increase the power of mankind within the universe. That's the nature of the mission. And that's the nature of what man must be. There is no level at which you can level off. There's no point at which you can say, we are now perfected. Every time you succeed, you demand a new level of success. Every set of progress you make demands continuation of that process, of processes. And that's what makes it, that money has no intrinsic value. It's just money. It doesn't do anything for you, except gratify some old creature. It doesn't do anything for you. What it does is human creativity, as which only mankind is capable of. Mankind is the only species known to us which is capable of actual creativity as a willful act. The discovery of higher principles, going to thermonuclear power as an application for the next generation. In the next generation, if we don't clap up now, we will actually go to Mars in a weeks-long journey through thermonuclear accession and decline. In a week's effort. I wouldn't want to do it now. The chances of surviving are very poor. But when you get to those levels, then we're going to go to matter-antimatter reactions, which are known to us, exist. And there are potentialities beyond that. Mankind has unlimited potential for man's role in the universe, if we survive to do it. Our job is to do that and survive in the process. And every thing we contribute to the advancement of technology, or really science, in this way, is essential for mankind. It's our essential destiny to shake hands with the stars.
Good. Well, that brings a conclusion to this Friday's webcast. As we said in the beginning, this is a regular feature on the LaRouche PAC website. This is an establishment. And I would also just strongly encourage everybody who is watching to study the companion piece that Mr. LaRouche has written, The Calamity of the Second Obama Administration. It's a very significant report, and it's available on the LaRouche PAC website. So thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time.